If your ex has an avoidant attachment style, you might be thinking whether they have the ability to become more secure, because perhaps you're watching this video and you're working at being more secure yourself and wondering whether the person I'm in relationship with or my ex, are they able to be more secure? I will answer this question, and I will answer the things you need to do in order for you to facilitate this and also for you to feel better about your love decisions. I'll explain everything after the jingle.
IGetMyExBack.com. Everyone deserves a second chance.
So the first element, if you want to be more secure, and it's the same if you're anxious, same if you're avoidant, is to be self-aware. The problem is that avoidant people, they dismiss things. Avoidant people, and I'm going to share a lot about my personal experience of being an avoidant, because I used to be avoidant. When you have an avoidant attachment style, there is a rationalization that the world is the problem, I'm okay, I don't overreact, people are too emotional, and it's because it's something that worked over the years, not dealing with the problem, not discussing difficult things with your parent, your partner, never entering a conflict, worked so well for your partner. For myself, it worked quite well for many years. Then it's very hard to challenge this mechanism and not recognizing that it's a coping mechanism and it's also a maladaptive adaptation. I will explain that later in the video. Of course, there's a temptation when you're dating someone, when you just broke up with someone who's avoidant, to tell them, I've discovered this new thing, attachment style, not this new thing. I discovered this concept, attachment style, and I figured out I'm an anxious and you're avoidant, and that explains everything. And it makes sense that you want to share that with your partner, telling them, I think you're avoidant, and maybe you should read about that. So I'm working on something specific to address this problem, and if you're interested, let me know in the comment section. I'll probably publish a website, basically the diary of an avoidant. That's the name, the code name that I'm using for this. If you're interested, let me know. But it's basically raising awareness, because the problem, avoidant people, because they don't feel the pain, they don't feel the problem, they wouldn't necessarily seek to find the answer. Whereas like anxious people, as the pain is so intense and they are directed to let's fix this, that they will research the solution and find out about attachment style. First of all, are you wasting your time? Yes and no. When I say wasting your time, we're dating someone who's avoidant. Of course, you might be thinking, I'm a former avoidant and therefore I will cheer for the avoidant. What I'm saying is that you will always end up with someone who's the opposite. You will always end up with someone who complements you. You can't be happy with someone who's anxious like you, for example, if you have an anxious attachment style. What you have to do is basically, obviously, work at being more secure, but you will always find yourself attracted to people who have avoidant traits, because you will help them becoming more emotional and in tune with their emotions, while they will help you to be okay with independence. They will challenge you on that front. The problem of anxious avoidant is about fear. So don't trust these compatibility assessments that you might find in dating apps. It's really not relevant. What matters is fear. And there's a clash between two very, very strong fears that we all have when we're anxious or avoidant. On one end is the fear of abandonment that anxious people will feel, and avoidant is the fear of commitment. It's the idea of this relationship represents a risk, and I'm scared that if things unfold the way it did when I was a little kid, I will suffer, right? Both ways, because fear is a signal, but living out of fear is living out of insecurities, are the wrong way, the bad way to deal with intimacy, right? And as I discussed before, we all developed coping mechanism because we don't want to get hurt. So anxious people will seek validation, they would want to be reassured because they don't want to get hurt. Avoidant people, they wouldn't invest too much in the relationship because they know if they depend too much on the relationship, if someone depends too much on the relationship, they will get hurt or they would make the other suffer. And so the result that we want, safety, might override the result, i.e. having a set of boundaries. So the thing is, when you realize that actually it's by setting up healthy boundaries, when you're anxious, when you're avoidant, and have a discussion about that, that you can really overcome this fear. There's an element of letting go. Especially when you're an avoidant, you have to let go of this idea that being vulnerable is bad. It's a sign of weakness. You have to let go of the fact that if you commit to a relationship, you are making yourself miserable because you're in a prison. Because for avoidant, making a decision, like any decision, is not choosing the other options. And so there's an element of letting go. When you commit with someone, you're saying no to other options. And so never forget that being attached to someone is a primary need. And so avoidant, they are going against this need. It's very important. It's obviously unconscious. So what will change their mind? Love. That's my personal experience. That's also what I see among some of my clients, is the pain of not being in a relationship, the pain of not experiencing the same happiness as people they see around them, the pain of being lonely, and of course you might be thinking avoidant, they like to be lonely, but to a certain point will trigger them to act. With pain, pain precedes action. And so when they've experienced something special, when you treated them as such, they would want this more. At some stage, the fear of commitment might have been above the pleasurable moments, the intensity of those interactions, the meaning of this relationship. But at the end of the day, they will value this. So this phase of being abnormal, in a way, it's a very common phase with avoidant people. When you're young and when you're in your 20s, not to commit in a relationship is kind of okay, right? But when you enter your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you see people having relationships, having a family, having a stable life, and when I say stable, not in a bad way, obviously, but a healthy and sustainable relationship that brings just more than being transactional, they will feel, I need this. Okay? So you also have to assess whether this relationship made them change their perception of relationship, made them realize that love can be helpful, can be beneficial in a world whether this relationship changed them. Because a relationship can change someone. When you touch love, it's hard to sort of let go of this. Okay, and again, it's really about fear and love. So it's very important because sometimes we are delusional about what we had with our partner. It's very important to assess whether that person was in love, whether this relationship was unique, was different. If you're not sure, have a look in the description. There's a quiz to know if you have any chance of getting back with your ex. And there's also an assessment to know your attachment style and know whether you're anxious, you're avoidant, you're secure. It's obviously not a diagnostic tool, but giving you some clarity on where you are on the spectrum. So, as I said, your relationship might change them or might not. It's also a fact. People will have so much, the belief system, the protective mechanism in place is so strong that they would be aware and will tell you, I know you're the right person. I know what we have special, but I can't. And it's very important what I'm going to say. The success or whether you're going to end up together has nothing to do with how much you love them. It has nothing to do with the attention, with the affection, with the kind words, with the gestures. It has nothing to do. Because when you act this way, you act from an anxious point of view. This is what you want, that's what you would want to get as an anxious person, right? So right now, if you have no news, if you're not in touch with your ex, or if you're in touch and it's not leading anywhere, the reason they're not getting back with you is not because you're not saying the right things or doing the right things. It has nothing to do with that. So you have to accept that something you can't control is how they perceived the relationship. And you can't change this. You need to understand that their own definition of happiness, their own definition of the quality of the satisfaction of the relationship is really down to them. And also remember, if you feel, oh my God, he's never gonna or she's never gonna realize what we had, that person, an avoidant person, will always end up with anxious people or people who are a bit anxious. Right? The same way you will end up always with someone who is a bit avoidant. It's always the case, and that's why we always end up in anxious avoidant. Anxious avoidant are actually the norm. When I say anxious avoidant, you might be thinking, yeah, but 50% of the population is secure. Yes, but you will always find tendency to be avoidant, tendency to be anxious, and when people clash, when two secure people clash, it's usually a clash of attachment. Right? It's just because we all have different thresholds, and you need to pass a certain threshold to be considered as avoidant or to be considered as avoidant, but in a way, we all have our own insecurities, and these insecurities will resurface when we're under stress, when there's a crisis in the relationship. I will end with something, a very important message. I forget always to mention that, but if you have any other things that you want to mention, let me know in the comment section. Here it is. What you need to accept now, because at this stage, the ball is in their court. Your job is not, as I said, to send flowers, to have big gestures. It's working at being more secure. That's the only way you will potentially influence them. That might not change the perception of the relationship, but in a way, it could also, and it will, make you feel better about the situation. Understand that doing this work is not acting as their therapist. You're doing the job for yourself. And that will benefit your next partner, perhaps your ex, but you're doing it for you. It's important that learning, let's say you achieve being more secure, if it's something we can achieve and tick. This won't necessarily bring your ex back. Don't get me wrong, I can't guarantee that if you work at being more secure, you will get them back. But, first of all, that will help you to heal, reflect on this relationship. And if they don't, again, the ball is in their court. It's because their definition of relationship, their experience of the relationship was completely different than yours. And if they were in love with you, and they're still have very much this fear of commitment, they might realize that they messed up. They might realize, I've missed a huge opportunity. And this is their risk. It's not yours. This is their risk. Because the thing is, as you're doing the work, as you're seeking answers, they don't. Right? And what happens sometimes, I see that sometimes, not frequently, but sometimes, you do the work, you let go, you finally move on, and a year or two after the breakup, they come back, realizing what they've lost. Because as they're not doing the work, because they're avoidant, as it took them time to be self-aware that the problem was not the world but themselves, sometimes it's too late. And at this time, because you would have figured out way before him or her, I know what I want, I know what I don't want, you would stop being attached and regretful of this relationship, you will simply let go. Because life is too short, because you don't want to put your love life on pause because someone doesn't know what he or she wants. And it's a very big question. What do I want? Right now, that's the only question you need to ask yourself. The answer is not your ex. The answer is, what do I want in terms of a relationship? And he or she needs to ask this question. And if your ex or if your partner doesn't want or doesn't feel the need to answer this question, you're wasting your time on this. I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
igetmyexback.com. Everyone deserves a second chance.